Hello once again, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the oncoming Brainstorm. And today we're going to be talking about Darkness and Light, the final part of the War Master box set Rage of the Time Lords, where we finally meet the Rage. I really love this story. The good for me far outweighs the bad. So picking up after Missing Link, you have the Doctor who's just had a brain surgery performed upon him by the Master, and he's now being shuffled away into confinement aboard the medical station. And you get a sense of things building up to a finale. Yeah, you got Mandrake who's trying to basically steal the Rage, the key experiment that the Master's been doing, and shuffle it off to the Celestial Intelligence Agency and allow them to use it in the Great Time War. So you have the Doctor realise that the entirety of the planet has been wiped out, all but one, Priya. And she's been kept behind as sort of a living witness to all the devastation that's been done. And we know that the Time Lords, of course, have sanctioned this massacre.
Yeah, which does lead into the really dodgy stuff they did during the Time War. Stuff like the Moment, these really dodgy weapons they created, and the Doctor's reaction when he finds out what the Master has done, committed casual genocide on this dead planet. The Doctor is disgusted, and there's a great quote.
It's like, every time I think I've seen you at your worst, you surprise me. But no, I mean, I think when it comes to like the Time War, we often see, hey, Daleks doing bad shit because they're Daleks, right? We see that a lot. We don't often get a sense of what were really the Time Lords doing that was so awful. You know, why is it that when, you know, in The Night of the Doctor, Cassie says, you know, who can tell the difference between a Dalek and a Time Lord at this point? You know, they're just as bad. It's like, oh, you know, stories like this, where they just allowed a whole planet to get wiped out, all in the name of creating some super weapon that doesn't even work in the end.
Yeah, I really love the idea that the Time War is just sort of looming on in the background during the War Master box set. And the Master's, obviously in this story, he is creating something to combat that. But there is that initial fear of the Time War, and that it is a thing that does have big repercussions on the Whoniverse. The Rage is a really cool villain, and I think personally really great concept. The way I kind of imagine it, because obviously we don't have that visual element, I do imagine it as this massive, just red, dark mist.
Because I always imagine it as like a big pile of black goo.
Yeah, it's kind of disgusting and gooey, and it can kind of morph and change form, and it has a lot of cool powers, such as shape-shifting.
Yeah.
It can play with time, and we do get a couple of scenes where it is kind of being quite trippy, playing with time, playing with the mask from the Doctor, and the voice for it is really creepy. As the story progresses, we see it does have more of a consciousness, and the Master actually sees it more of a sort of like a son, like his greatest achievement in a way. It does give me vibes of the villain from the Holy Terror.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah, the really all-powerful baby thing. And there's a great scene that I really like where you have the Master and the Doctor who decide to team up against the Rage. In spite of how much the Doctor is furious at what the Master has done, they agree to work together to try and stop it spreading. They head on down into like the lower decks. They're trying to navigate this big, large complex through the back hatches, and the Doctor thinks he knows where he's going, and then he's climbing on the ladder, and suddenly the numerals aren't lining up properly. And then he's climbing on down, and suddenly the ladder is much shorter than it should be, and the Master starts hearing voices in his head, and it's like, what the heck is going on?
Yeah, it's like an alternate timeline that the Rage had pulled forward and kind of brought into present. So yeah, it has really cool powers.
I think that is sick. I think it's really, really cool. Very trippy and like unnerving, because it's like it grabbed a hold of Jacoby and now it like knows what he's planning and whatnot. Really cool. And as we go along, like the creature like demonstrates more and more scary powers.
Yeah, one where he does actually project himself as one of the Master's lackeys and manages to trick the Doctor and the Master, but not for too long. I think the Master cots onto it.
Yeah. They like project him, and he's like, you don't quite replicate his vocal patterns. Excellent attention to detail. Like the Master, I mean, in the story, like it really plays up his intelligence in the story. I think it goes too far. We can get to that as we go along.
I think at times it can be hard to strike that balance with making the Master very competent and smart, but without it going so far that he is like, he knows everything, he's planned everything the whole time. It's hard to do that. I think in other stories maybe they've done it a bit better. Here he is like the god of the whole story, like he knows, it's almost like he knows everything that's going to happen. And maybe he's a little OP in some ways, a little overpowered.
There are big problems with this story, as much as I love it. Like, the Doctor breaks out of his cell, He said he used the thing from his shoelace to create a telescope that somehow unlocked his door, and then he stopped explaining the explanation would bore you or something like that. And he's like, oh, well, if the Doctor never got out of his cell, he wouldn't be able to do anything in the story. So that's kind of dumb. I mean, it does get worse in some respects, like the Master's plan. You realise the Master supposedly planned all this. He planned for the 2 comic relief characters to get cowardly and run away. He knew that Mandrake was a celestial intelligence, whatever.
But he still employed him.
Yeah, he deliberately did that so that Mandrake would take the rage out of confinement, right? Because the rage wouldn't properly mature if it was in confinement. And he wanted the Doctor, him and Prior to team up and run through the shuttle cave. And then for Prior to get kidnapped by the rage, replaced by the rage, without them noticing, continue running through the shuttle caves, get to the escape pods, and then lock the Doctor and the rage in one of the pods and psychically fuse them, right, their brains. Right? That was his plan all along.
There are so many variables he had to control to do that. It feels quite convoluted and really? You knew all of this? Yeah. It feels like you just kind of came up with this as you went along.
Well, he says that the rage would be able to know what I'm planning, so I just used other people to enact my plan. Sounds cool, but it's how on earth could you have predicted all of that? And of course, it doesn't matter anyway, because the rage just reverses time.
Yeah, and from there we get to some really cool scenes inside the rage's consciousness when the Doctor and the Master are kind of morphing in with the rage. And yeah, they have a really awesome dialogue with each other.
Yeah, and they talk about their place in the universe, about how the Doctor is the good in the universe. He's the light, and the Doctor and the Master is the darkness. He's the evil. He's the rage. And
there's a little bit of the Doctor in the Master, and a little bit of the Master in the Doctor. Yeah, a bit of heroism and lightness in the Master, and a bit of darkness and the villainy in the Doctor. Yeah, this stuff is great, although it is very trippy and a little science-wise. It's could this really happen?
Yeah, it's it absorbs them and all they know and whatnot, and yet they're able to project their morality into it, and that causes it to do a Dalek and just suicide.
Yeah, and kind of the Doctor's light and the Master's darkness neutralizes it, and then I guess its morality the rage just decides to commit suicide.
It's oh, I don't want to destroy the universe, so I'm just going to kill myself, and I'm okay. And then the Doctor and the Master get reincorporated and they're alive. And it's okay, alright. And the Master manages to get away before the Doctor.
And then we get into another mindfuck at the end.
Oh yeah.
Where the 8th Doctor's memory gets wiped for the 100th time.
He's the Doctor who is perpetually losing his memory. You will listen to Terra Firma, the Doctor Who movie. In Terra Firma, he forgot 2 companions. How do you forget 2 companions, right? And then you get Orbis, where I think Morbius wipes his memory as well. It's Jesus, this guy cannot hang on to his memories. But yeah, no, I actually kind of like that. It's that's something reasonable the Master could have planned. It's oh, well, if I'm going to make sure the Doctor gets out of this alive, I don't want him to remember anything. Okay, sure, that makes sense.
And the way they do portray that scene is quite funny. It's slightly comedic. I don't know if it's a self-aware thing with the writers. Big Finish knows it. The fans kind of laugh about how the 8th Doctor is constantly losing his memory, so it could be a little joke, because it is kind of laughable at the end where the Doctor's no! The Master's ha 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 ha. It's quite fun. So in conclusion, Darkness and Light is a really enjoyable story. It has its issues, but I think it is one of those things where you described it earlier, where because it is so entertaining and there's some really high points there, I think it does balance and overlevel some of the weirder and what stuff.
I mean, overall, I think it's one of my favourite War Master stories.
Yeah, and I do see the missing link in the Darkness and Light as 2 really great stories that come to one as a nice, almost 2-part finale. Something I wish the TV series would do.
So that was Darkness and Light. Thank you very much for watching.
Yeah, thank you, and let us know your thoughts on War Master 3 and each of the stories. What was your favourite? And what would you like to see going forward into War Master 4 Anti-Genesis?
Yeah, we're very excited for that. I think it's going to involve going back in time and stopping the genesis of the Daleks in some way. But I guess we'll see when we get to that.
So catch you next time. Take care and goodbye.
Bye-bye.